Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to this very special preview of the Indiana Derby and the Indiana Oaks. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Well, listen, I'm not going to sit here and try to preview the Indiana Derby and the Indiana Oaks without somebody actually in Indiana on the show with me. And so I'm going to be joined by the voice of Horseshoe Indianapolis, and that is Mr. John Dooley. John, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about really one of the signature days for Horseshoe Indy.
Hey, great to have me on. I know the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. It's just underway, so great to be a part of it here on a big weekend in Indiana at Horseshoe Indianapolis, the marquee event of the season, Grade 3 Indiana Derby and Grade 3 Indiana Oaks. So looking forward to talking about Indiana's biggest day of racing with you here on the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Sounds cool, that NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Love it. Great job, Matthew.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And you and Andy Serling are the first two guests I've had. So this is a lot, a lot of good company. So listen, let's talk a little bit before we get into those two races specifically. Some people on days like this just kind of come in and start playing a new track for the first time, or maybe they have not played Horseshoe Indy, over the last year. What are some general pieces of advice you would give to players who are maybe new to playing Horseshoe Indy in terms of maybe how the track plays, or maybe even local connections to look for on the undercard as well?
Matthew, it's been such an interesting week for us here at Horseshoe Indianapolis, Indiana Derby week starting today, day 3, talking about the 4th of July. But it was a dry start to Indiana Derby week, Monday, Tuesday cards, Wednesday. We were fast and firm. And along comes the 4th of July and a lot of heavy rain. So it certainly made an impact on the main track. And with no turf racing on the 4th of July holiday card, won't be able to tell you about the turf course. Now, earlier this week, we had the turf rail set at 48 feet, whole different track. Turf course profile for the big day coming up on Saturday with some nice turf races as well. The turf rails will be down. So that kind of changes the whole complex, the complexion of the turf course when it comes to, your handicapping thinking and who you might like. But I have to say the main track here overall at the meet's been pretty fair. I mean, you want to be inside. You want to be, if you don't have the speed to lead, certainly be a stalker. Closers have done okay, but it's tougher, obviously, from any outside position. But a lot of times that can be the case, at any track that you're wagering on. But for the most part, I would say, may the best horse win, and they certainly have. I mean, it was a formful start to the week. We had a few long shots come in on the Tuesday card here at Horseshoe Indianapolis and also on Wednesday. So coming in on the holiday with heavy rain. Today, don't know what to expect, but hopefully we dry out by Friday and certainly for Indiana Derby Day on Saturday's big day of the meet.
Absolutely. Well, listen, like I said, 2 headline races later in the card, the Indiana Oaks, Indiana Derby. I was curious whether there was any horse or race on the undercard that you were maybe a little bit intrigued by, or some dynamics on that undercard that were a little bit more interesting.
By the way, I apologize with the heavy rain. The announcer booth phone just rang, so obviously it's one of your new NYRA Bet YouTube channel subscriber channel people checking in to give you some praise. But Matthew, I really look forward. You have horses, terrific. Some part of the undercard, horse like Mr. Wireless. Who won, back here, stake race back in 2022. You've got the likes of Trademark and some of these horses just that have locked horns here in the past at Horseshoe Indianapolis. So I've always been a big fan, even down at the fairgrounds with those hard-hitting older horses. Always have liked those type of horses. And when you have again, mentioning Mr. Wireless, Trademark, who won back in 2023, those type of horses. Capuna joins the mix. Capuna 4 wins, 7 seconds. I mean, which Capuna? Talk about, the real fierceness. We'll be the real Capuna, 4 wins, 7 seconds. And, he's played second fiddle more than wins. But those type of horses in those handicap races, I've always liked here at Horseshoe Indianapolis, and we'll certainly get that, on Saturday's card. 5-star General. I mean, Grant Foster, he's done a great job with that horse and has the rail draw as well. So I always look forward to the handicap races here, whether it's at Horseshoe Indianapolis or certainly down at the fairgrounds during the winter months where I go.
Yeah, absolutely. That number 8 race was actually, it's funny that Schaefer Memorial was exactly the race I was looking at as well. That I thought was just so interesting to see. And there looks to be a lot of speed in that particular race with, like you said, 5-star General, as well as the number 2 Injunction and the number 3 Understood Tab. So a lot of speed. And yeah, Mr. Wireless was one who I thought really stood out. Trademark, if Vicky Oliver can get that horse back to the form that he showed winning the Grade 2 Clark last year at Churchill Downs. And, certainly a horse like Money Supply, even for Joe Sharp's been coming out of some pretty tough graded stakes races, won the Mine Shaft down at Fairgrounds a couple of races ago, and is a horse that can maybe sit off the pace a little bit. So it's funny you went to the same race I did, and I really thought was interesting for that undercard. So.
And Joe Sharp has teamed this meet with Jaime Torres. So Jaime, obviously, when they're not running in Kentucky, has made the drive here to Horseshoe Indianapolis, and he's made an impact. And, Jaime Torres, of course, having won this year's Preakness Stakes, a big fan of his, having watched him ride down at Fairgrounds during the winter months. And what a year, Brian Hernandez Jr., he's coming in to ride. Of course, the Indiana Oaks, he's done well in that in the past for Kenny McPeak, and also in the Indiana Derby. And Brian, having won, obviously, the 150th Kentucky Derby with Mystic Dan, and, of course, taking out the Kentucky Oaks as well. So BJ certainly having one of those, type of Eclipse Award-winning seasons.
Absolutely. And that ride in the Kentucky Derby will be one that we talk about for a long time. One of the more brilliant rides, riding right up the rail. I mean, very much so. His protege, his mentor, Calvin Bow-Rail, would have been very proud of him in that spot. Well, let's talk about the Indiana Oaks a little bit. This is an 8-horse field. Your morning line favorite is the Brad Cox filly Impel. And this one certainly looks very tough in this spot. You have another horse, Chadalos, who's a grade 2 winner, but coming off a long layoff, hasn't run yet in 2024. Ken McPeak's Band of Gold, as well as Rusty Arnold's Neon Icon, all horses that are single-digit odds. John, this one, listen, Impel, if she brings her A game, looks pretty tough in this spot. Do you think she's kind of a single potential type of a horse, or do you think she could get upset in this race?
I thought that last night, having a chance to watch her race during the winter when she broke her maiden with Florent Giroux at Gulfstream Park. And I remember on that New Year's Day talking to Florent after the race, says, how about this Impel, for Juddmonte? And he said, she's a good filly. And then, of course, Brad Cox with so many horses, he needed to separate his top fillies. So Impel wound up going to Oaklawn Park, and Brad keeping that string of fillies, and also stable at the fairgrounds as well. So the fact that Florent Giroux coming into rider, and she's tactical. But went back last night and rewatched the races for Chadalos, and wow, what a such a game filly. She's drawn inside, and maybe she takes that early lead. Now Florent Giroux traditionally has been tough on Indiana Derby days. Over the last several years, he's won. In fact, he leads almost all jockeys, including Brian Hernandez Jr., Julian Leparoux, with 14 or more wins. I think it's 14 on Indiana Derby Day since about 9 years ago, over a 9-year span. So Florent on an Indiana Derby Day is certainly one of the top jockeys to watch. But Antonio Fresu, when he rode Chadalos in the Chandelier Stakes, as Frank Miramati called it, Chandelier, responding to Antonio Fresu. And, I was impressed with her. And I think, she's, again, making her first run of 2024. But going back to some of those races out in Cali, she's a tough cookie. And Antonio Fresu obviously making his first trip here to ride at Horseshoe Indianapolis, where as Florent Giroux maybe has that tactical advantage, having ridden here over the track in years past.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, like I said, a horse that you mentioned, making the first start, but it's not uncommon for us to see 2-year-olds make a big jump from 2 to 3 as they just mature, particularly fillies, as they mature, get a little bit bigger, fill out a little bit more. So I think certainly a one that's a little bit dangerous at 8-1. The other horse that I was just going to briefly mention at a little bit of a price was on the far outside, Little Jamie, getting the blinkers off for Bobby Medina. And this is one who, can certainly go the distance and should sit that kind of traditional mid-pack tracking trip. Has some versatility, though. And the speed figures are, have been creeping up in the right direction. That one at 12-1, I thought was maybe a little bit interesting with Corey Lannery aboard. But let's head on to the headliner. And that is, of course, the grade 3 Indiana Derby going 1 mile and a 16th on the dirt. And this is an 8-horse field, but we should mention the number 6 horse, Sir Greyland, has been scratched. Grant Forrester made that known earlier this week. And that is notable because that horse was going to be part of the early pace dynamic, presumably. And so that does change the complexion of the race. I think most casual fans would look at this race and go, Stronghold. I remember that horse. He was in the Kentucky Derby. And horses like EJ Won the Cup and Dragoon Guard may not have the name profile, but certainly I think would look more than capable of potentially launching an upset in this spot.
Yeah, when it's interesting, Matthew, when the entries came out, right away I texted jockey Marcelino Pedrosa Jr. because also they're running that Iowa Festival of Racing with the Iowa Oaks and Iowa Derby. And I text Marcelino, who rides the bulk of horses here for Brad Cox. And, Marcelino, you're going to be on Dragoon Guard. And he said, no, Florent's coming in to ride. And right away that ticked my box, knowing that, here we go. Florent got the choice in the derbies that'll be run this coming Saturday. And Florent Giroux, as I mentioned, 14 wins over the last 9 seasons here on an Indiana Derby day. And obviously, it has success in this race in the past. Florent opting to ride Dragoon Guard, of course, who's won his last 2 there in Kentucky. But also, and you mentioned the scratch of the 6 to Sir Greyland. But yeah, you have a Grade 1 winner, the Santa Anita Derby winner, and obviously a lot of eyes on that horse, but certainly some up-and-coming horses. And also intrigued by, EJ Won the Cup. I mean, some of those smaller type of derbies, obviously having won at Turf Paradise. And then, back in 97, I opened up the old, Lone Star Park now so many years on, but having taken out the Texas Derby for Doug O'Neill. So Doug runs horses here. He's no stranger to Horseshoe Indianapolis. So I'm certainly keeping my eyes on EJ Won the Cup. The only rub for me with EJ Won the Cup is I'm a Ranger fan, New York Rangers. Eric Johnson, Flyers. Come on. I don't know.
Well, so as a Philadelphia native, that's maybe I need to start backing that horse now and getting in on this. But yeah, this is a really interesting race. I mean, it's certainly a very good one. Dragoon Guard is one who, is trying a couple of things for the first time. Is going to be running off, has ran off Lasix in debut, but the last 2 victories have come with Lasix. Now switching back off, and is going to be trying 2 turns for the first time. But you would imagine horse sired by Arrogate is not going to have any issues with the distance in that regard. So you would imagine that's a horse that will be able to handle it. And, EJ Won the Cup, sired by another one that I really like, Omaha Beach, who I think has had a very nice, first and second crop of horses. So I think more than capable of launching the upset. And I think the one thing about Stronghold is Grade 1 winner and a horse that always really fights and tries hard. You have to respect that horse, and is going to sit the sort of, inside pocket trip, I would imagine, from that rail. And so certainly a more than capable horse of winning for Phil D'Amato. But one that really hasn't taken that next step in terms of speed figures, has been kind of in that like high 80, low 90, and again, coming off the Kentucky Derby, that can take a lot out of a horse. You never know how they respond coming out of those types of big races. Obviously, we saw just a couple weeks ago, Catching Freedom coming out of the Preakness, ran a little bit of a more mediocre race, I would say, finishing 4th in the Ohio Derby. So something to always be skeptical of, particularly at a horse that's going to be a rather short price in this race.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, a horse like Dragoon Guard. I mean, having watched the Florent Giroux for so many years, when he's out on the lead by himself, I mean, talk about walking the dog.
Yep.
And Dragoon Guard, out to the front with that scratch of the 6 to Sir Greyland, withdrawn, by Grant Forster. But you have a horse like Real Men Violin that doesn't really have that early speed. Really would prefer a faster pace setup. I mean, he's been locking horns with some of those horses in the likes of the Texas Derby and up on the south side of Chicago in the Illinois Derby. I mean, in talented hands with Brian Hernandez Jr. But I could just picture Antonio Fresu or BJ, on Real Men Violin, just watching, looking up front as they're looking ahead, and there's Florent just like this, with Dragoon Guard, until they come for home. So I think that horse is going to be very difficult to beat. And as you mentioned, the son of Arrogate, and certainly has breeding wise the stamina to stay the 8.5 furlongs in the Indiana Derby.
Absolutely. Well, John, I know you got to get ready to call the first race today at Horseshoe Indy, so I'm going to let you go. But I appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and make sure for everybody listening to tune in to John's calls on Saturday at Horseshoe Indy for their big day. And listen, watch John every day when he's up there. Always good stuff. So, John, thank you so much again for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Matthew, best with the NYRA YouTube channel, and we have one for Horseshoe Indianapolis as well. And look forward to on big days wherever I might be to join you anytime to talk some handicapping and to talk to your subscribers.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. For John Dooley, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.